Dude, did you order...
The new iPhone 17 Pro? Got it from Verizon, the best 5G network in America. I've never looked so good.
You look the same.
But with this camera, everything looks better, especially me.
You haven't changed your hair in 15 years. Selfies? Check, please.
With Verizon, new and existing customers can get the new iPhone 17 Pro, designed to be the most powerful iPhone ever, plus a new iPad and Apple One, with eligible phone trade-in and unlimited ultimate. Best 5G source root metrics data, United States, 1H 2025. All rights reserved. Trade-in and additional terms apply for all offers. See Verizon.com for details.
If you're a smoker or vapor, ready to make a change, you really only need one good reason. But with Zyn nicotine pouches, you'll discover many good reasons. Zyn is America's #1 nicotine pouch brand. Plus, Zyn offers a robust rewards program. There are lots of options when it comes to nicotine satisfaction, but there's only one Zyn. Check out zyn.com/find to find Zyn at a store near you. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
Hello and welcome to 31 Days of Terror 2025, and we are on day number 16. And I have two spooky stories for you today, and our first story comes from Graham. I've recently been listening to your viewers' stories dealing with visits from deceased family members through their dreams, and I wanted to share an experience I once had as a young teenager. Back in the mid-1970s, I was going through a terrible time. I was 12 years old. My parents were constantly arguing, leading to their divorce a few years later, and I had just started high school that year. My school marks dropped dramatically as I lost focus because I was constantly worried my dad would pack his bags and leave while my sister and I were at school. And at night, as I lay in bed listening to my parents argue, I'd stress about school and lay awake for hours. It seemed like a vicious circle that would never end, and I don't think I'd ever felt so alone. As things got worse between my parents, my grandmother, my dad's mum, would come over to talk sense into them. Now, my grandmother wasn't your typical cuddly, cheerful grandmother. She had grown up in a farming village in the north of England and married young, eventually giving birth to 9 children, my dad being the second youngest. Life was hard, and whatever money my granddad scraped together he would spend at the pub. He also had a very violent temper, and my grandmother and her children would often bear the brunt of his anger. Understandably, my grandmother became a hard, stern, somewhat bitter woman due to her tough married life. My granddad ended up dying a few years before I was born, and my grandmother eventually left England and moved to Elizabeth, South Australia, soon followed by my dad, my mum, and 2-year-old me. Not long after I turned 13, my grandmother suddenly passed away. My dad and his sister decided on having a private open coffin viewing before the funeral one night, and typically this caused another argument between my parents, as my dad insisted that I go, but my mum thought I was too young to view a deceased body. Dad won out, and that night he took me, my 16-year-old cousin, and my aunt to the funeral home. As we stepped into the dimly lit room, the attendant pulled back a heavy curtain to allow us to see my grandmother, laying in her coffin. As I looked at her pale face, I remember feeling terrified that her eyes would suddenly spring open and she'd leap out of the coffin. Clearly, I had watched too many Hammer horror movies. Of course, nothing happened, and after paying our respects, we left the funeral home. Both my cousin and I were left shaken, though, as this was the first time we'd seen a deceased body. A few nights later, I had a very unsettling dream. I dreamt I was alone in the kitchen of our house, sitting at the dining table. Suddenly the door to my right opened and my grandmother slowly walked in dressed in a white nightgown. She stared, unsmiling at me as she approached closer, and then suddenly clutched me by the throat with both hands and started to strangle me. I woke up gasping and completely terrified. For days the whole experience left me extremely upset, and I didn't want to share this nightmare with my parents, so I kept it to myself and tried to deal with it. It weighed heavily on me though. And together with the pressure of school and a toxic home life, looking back I actually wonder if I was close to a nervous breakdown. About a week later, still feeling upset, I had another dream. Once again, I was alone at the dining table and fearfully glanced towards the door to my right. Slowly the door opened and in walked my grandmother dressed in her white gown. The whole scenario was unfolding exactly like my previous nightmare. Terrified, I sat frozen as she approached me. Yet this time, instead of grabbing my throat, she paused to smile lovingly at me and wrapped her arms around me in a comforting hug. I awoke feeling like a great weight had been lifted off me. Although I still had issues to deal with in my life, I felt much happier and stronger to face things. Strangely, I've never dreamt of my grandmother since. So this could have been my subconscious simply creating this dream as a defense mechanism to prevent my stressed out mental and physical health from deteriorating any further. Or did my grandmother's spirit actually visit me through my dream, to show me love and comfort after a horrible nightmare brought on by the viewing? I honestly hope it's the latter, as it's comforting to know that our loved ones do watch over us after we've passed. I would also like to think that our loved ones like to watch over us after they've passed as well, because, you know, the amount of dream stories that come into this podcast, these visitation dreams where people are left comforted and feeling good, I honestly, I don't care if it is psychological or if it is your brain just inventing something to make you feel better. I would just like to think that it is your loved ones taking the time to make you feel better, especially after having like a horrific nightmare about your grandmother. And I get it, you know, seeing a dead body in a coffin is a really big deal. And if you've never seen one before, I imagine it's an even bigger deal. And when you're older, as in when you're a teenager experiencing that for the first time, I do think it's somehow worse. Because as a teenager, you know what's happened. You understand exactly what's going on, and your brain, especially if, you know, as you said, I'm sure jokingly, you watched a lot of Hammer horror, etc., you associate dead bodies with like zombies, with horror, with vampires, with all those awful things. Whereas when you're younger, you just sort of accept it for what it is. And somehow I think that takes the fear out of it. So it makes sense that your brain then, you know, orchestrated this horrible nightmare of her coming and strangling you. And especially when you're also dealing with the toxic environment of your parents being unhappy. And, you know, I think as adults, if you've lived a toxic environment, you know the impact that it has had on you, you know, whether you like it or not. And those things combined probably created that awful nightmare. And I'd like to think it was your grandmother coming back to be like, look, you can dream about me in a nice way. I can look after you. I can comfort you. It's not all bad. It is okay.
You know how everything's a subscription now? Music, movies, even socks. I swear if
To continue this ad, please upgrade to Premium Plus Platinum.
What? No. Anyway, Blue Apron.
This is a pay-per-listen ad. Please confirm your billing.
Oh, that's annoying. At least with the new Blue Apron, there's no subscription needed. Get delicious meals delivered without the weekly plan.
Wait, no subscription?
Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first two orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
AI had the time of my life. AI never felt this way before.
From building timelines to assigning the right people and even spotting risks across dozens of projects, Monday Sidekick knows your business, thinks ahead, and takes action. One click on the star and consider it done.
And I owe it all to you.
Try Monday Sidekick. AI you'll love to use on Monday.com.
If you're a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility and your machinery isn't working right, Grainger knows you need to understand what's wrong as soon as possible. So when a conveyor motor falters, Grainger offers diagnostic tools like calibration kits and multimeters to help you identify and fix the problem. With Grainger, you can be confident you have everything you need to keep your facility running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Tired of your car insurance rate going up even with a clean driving record? You're not alone. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/ACAST today.
And our second story today comes from Emilia. I would just like to start off by saying that this is a massive trigger warning, as my story contains the topics of suicide, murder, and child loss. This isn't my personal story, but unfortunately my family and I have to live with the outcome, and it's always there to remind us of what had happened. My father entered the military before I was even born. A part of his military agreement was that he had to be deployed to a war country for a few months to help out the citizens. When I was around 5 or 6 years old, he eventually had to take that agreement and he was shipped off for 6 months to Afghanistan. I was too young to understand what was going on and never knew where he went. I knew he went for work, but I didn't know all the stuff that he actually had to do. We would FaceTime as much as possible, and my mom and I would mail him food from Canada. Simple necessities like ketchup, hot sauce and little snacks. Those 6 months passed by pretty fast, and he ended up surprising me when I was at school. It looked like those cute videos you see online of military parents surprising their children. Me and my family ended up moving away to be located across the country for, again, my dad's job in the military. He didn't go away this time though. It was a community for military families, and we met this one family in particular. They had a daughter around the same age as me and my sister, so we would often play with her. Her and her family would come over for dinner, or we would go to their home. It was just the little girl, her mom and her dad. The dad was an amazing guy. He was even on a billboard coming into the town in his military uniform. Little me thought it was so badass looking. After a few years went by, my friend and her family moved away, and we didn't keep in contact with them after that. I think it was only our dads that would connect over the phone. Well, one day my mom and dad called me into their rooms and told me that there was an accident involving my friend and her family. They explained that my friend's dad was very ill. He had seen too much throughout his job and he had flashbacks. So he ran to his gun case and killed his wife and daughter, thinking they were bad. After realising what he had done, he then proceeded to use the gun on himself and his mother. They were later found in the house, all passed away. Little me didn't really understand at the time, but now that I'm almost 19 and I think about it from time to time, imagining how scary it must have been for her. I was always afraid my dad would do that to me because he had experienced the same things. Later on, as I'd gotten older, I noticed things about my father that didn't quite make sense. He would have outbursts. Sometimes he would come into my room and hug me and would sob in my arms and tell me that he was sorry. If any loud noises went off, he would sob and scream, and that was very confusing as a kid. I later learned that after my dad came back from the war, him and my mom weren't doing well financially and would have to get donations from the food bank, and he would often try to kill himself because of the stress and PTSD. One day my dad came into my room and I was listening to your podcast, and he seemed to be interested in it. I then paused it and asked him, "Hey Dad, have you ever seen a ghost?" And he said he has these dreams where he's in a white room with a table and chairs in his work uniform with his friend, the man that I was talking about who had passed away. He would sit there looking at my dad with disappointment in his face in the dream, and my dad was yelling, "Why would you leave me here? Why did you leave? Why did you go and do what you did?" And his friend wouldn't say a word and just look at him. He had this dream about once a month for years and years. It's always the same. He has tried to control it multiple times, but he can't seem to crack the code on how to get his friend to talk to him. I told him the next time you have the dream, make sure that you're aware and try and take control of it. There was another time when he came back from the war. He was home alone and was sleeping in his bed, when all of a sudden he was woken up by an Afghan man yelling in pain. He woke up and saw a man in uniform appearing over him. He was transparent. He was speaking in a different language and my dad didn't understand, so he didn't reply. And then the man in uniform turned around and disappeared. But it really freaked him out. Again, he has told me all of this once I was older. He became very close to me only, so he will recall all of these things that I had just mentioned only to me. There are so many more incidents that have happened, but I feel like those aren't really anything ghostly. I'm honestly not sure why that dream happens to him, if it's his friend visiting him or if it's his mind playing tricks on him. The other story, he didn't give me a very good description of what had happened, but I thought it was cool and maybe would bring more awareness to what our military has to go through and that it's okay to reach out for help. It has taken him a long time to be where he is now. Today is my dad's first day at his PTSD treatment centre, and he is there for 2 to 3 months to try and get help. Do you know what, Emilia? like, I do think it's so important to highlight the fact that people, you know, military people who they go on tour and to various countries, do whatever it is that they need to do. Like, the things that they see and the impact that PTSD has on your life is frankly unbelievable. I mean, we know about it intellectually, right? We know that PTSD exists. We know that people who come back from war suffer from PTSD or can suffer from PTSD. Not everybody does, but, you know, a lot of people do. If you are in a war-torn country, it causes irreparable damage to your brain in various ways. And to come back and then, you know, sort of be expected to live a normal life and just manage the horrors that you've seen, it's just not possible, you know? And treatment for PTSD is so important because PTSD can ruin your life, as your story shows. And I'm so glad that your dad is starting treatment because he deserves it. He deserves to get help and he deserves to get better and he deserves to live a life that doesn't, you know, that isn't completely marred by the job that he had to do. Do you know? Yeah. And just to be clear, you do not have to have been to war to suffer from PTSD. Just so people are listening can understand that. You don't have to have been in, you know, active combat to have PTSD. That's the thing that is it's obviously most associated with. And obviously back, you know, post World War I, we had shell shock, and that's where our diagnoses of PTSD came from, etc., etc. But you do not have to have been to war to be suffering from PTSD. If you have had a traumatic experience, you could end up with PTSD. And it is valid and important to reach out for help if you think that you are suffering from PTSD. There's also different forms of PTSD. So PTSD can involve things like flashbacks, as Emilia's dad experienced, you know, those triggers like loud noises, etc., etc. I mean, all those triggers are different depending on the situation that you were in. But it also, you know, there's things called complex or compound PTSD, which again is another form of PTSD, which equally can dictate your life and cause major issues in your life. And I think the dream that your dad has about his friend is really interesting because, you know, obviously we're not going to know if it's a visitation dream or if it is your dad's brain trying to make sense of everything that happened. But I do think it's really interesting that I imagine your dad probably feels a lot of anger towards his friend that his friend didn't speak to him, and he's having the same feelings and same issue in his dream, that his friend just won't say a word to him, won't speak to him. I think that's really interesting. And I do genuinely think that everyone who goes and, you know, is deployed to an active combat zone is going to come back with ghosts of some form. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Graham and Emilia for sending in your stories. Remember, if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
If you're a smoker or vapor, ready to make a change, you really only need one good reason. But with Zyn nicotine pouches, you'll discover many good reasons. Zyn is America's #1 nicotine pouch brand. Plus, Zyn offers a robust rewards program. There are lots of options when it comes to nicotine satisfaction. But there's only one Zyn. Check out Zyn.com/find to find Zyn at a store near you. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.